it's semi-final time of the Iron World Cup as I look to crown the best game improvement iron of 2021. And we've got a great lineup for you today, as the Wilson D9 is going head to head against the Mizuno JPX921 Hot Metal. Okay, these two are pretty different when it comes to styling. I would say the Wilson D9 is a little bit bigger in terms of volume, but when we look at things such as sole width, there's actually not that much difference. Personally for me, my eye is drawn towards the Mizuno, so I'm going to hit that first. So I'm testing both of these out in a 6-iron, and you would think because of that, and given the nature of the game improvement clubs, that these would be very chunky over the ball. But Mizuno have been quite clever here. The top of the club on the top line is kind of two different tones, one more shiny and one more matted, which actually makes the top line look a lot smaller than it is, which I definitely really like over the ball. Now visually for me, I do actually really like the shaping of this, and there is some offset on this, but definitely not that much that would put me off. Struck that pretty nicely, definitely had a nice ball flight, and also flew a pretty strong distance. It started out at 168 there. Very consistent in terms of distance so far. I think a massive positive about these for a lot of people is going to be that even though you've got the extra forgiveness and distance, you're not really giving that much up in terms of the feel and the looks. That was probably my best strike so far, and I've managed to squeeze a little bit more distance out of it, but still very consistent in terms of front to back dispersion so far. Okay, that was my best strike yet, and it's flown 174 yards, which is definitely pretty long for me with a 6-iron. What I like about this is the fact that even though we've got quite a chunky sole on this, Mizuno have done a great job of putting some camber on the back of it, so you don't really feel like you're hitting things really chunky and getting too much kind of matte or turf interaction, and that's pretty important to me in terms of feel. Definitely impressed with the dispersion. They all seem to be flying pretty straight, and generally I'm hitting kind of that nice little draw that I do like to hit. Okay, so all in all, I was pretty happy with the numbers there. I averaged 170 yards carry, which is definitely pretty good for me with a 6-iron. But really for me, the best thing was probably the dispersion. My worst shot here only finished 12 yards from the pin, so just over 30 feet, which I'd definitely be really pleased with out on the course. I was also really happy with the overall trajectory and the height of the shots, but I would say this was slightly inconsistent. However, I was getting a really good steep land angle into the green, which is definitely going to help you stop those balls quicker. So far, so good, but let's go and hit the Wilson and see what the big differences are. Now this definitely looks a bit chunkier over the golf ball in terms of the top line, but the other shapings are quite similar. Another thing to note here is you can see kind of the back of the club here coming out of the back of the top line over the ball. These are also a little bit shinier than you've seen in the Mizunos. These continue to be a really long iron. That's just flown out at 177 yards. Not my best strike, and that's still easily flown 170. I do think these feel a bit easier to hit in terms of getting them launching and setting them off, but I'm not sure they're quite as consistent in terms of launch direction and start line as the Mizunos. That's nearly flown 180. That's seriously impressive. Weirdly, I'm suddenly hitting more of a fade with these, which is definitely not my normal shot shape. I think I'm starting to hit these straighter as I go along. The thicker sole actually doesn't feel as bad on here as I thought it was going to, but it still is kind of off-putting being able to see this back of the club over the ball. So that ended up being a lot closer than I thought it might be. In fact, the ball speeds for the two clubs were within half a mile an hour of each other. But then when it comes to total carry distance, it was the Wilson that ended up being just over 3 yards longer than the Mizuno. This was a bit surprising because I did feel like I was hitting the Wilson a bit further than that. What's quite surprising is I was actually swinging the Wilson slower than I was with the Mizuno, but I was still getting a slightly higher ball speed and more distance out of it. Again, in terms of launch angle and height, the numbers were ridiculously similar. There was only like 3 feet difference between the height of the two and less than half a degree difference in terms of launch angle. And it was the Mizuno that just slightly squeezed it here. It was launching slightly higher, and that meant it also had a steeper descent angle, which might make this slightly easier to land softly on the greens. Probably the biggest difference in terms of numbers was actually the spin. The Mizuno was spinning 500 more, which is definitely going to help a bit with that stopping power and control. Now for me, when I was hitting the shots, I felt like I could hit that little draw that I like to hit with the Mizuno, whereas in comparison with the Wilson, I was hitting a little fade, which was a little bit weird for me. But actually when we came to look at the dispersion, the Wilson was a lot more controlled, the dispersion was a lot smaller, and you can see here we didn't have that kind of two-way left and right miss that we did with the Mizuno. So I think the Wilson has absolutely smashed it out of the park here in terms of dispersion and total miss, which is definitely what you want in terms of forgiveness in that game improvement iron. When we take all the numbers into account here, I think it's fair to say there's one clear winner. So it'll be the Wilson D9 that books the first place in the Iron World Cup final. Right, that's all for today. If you have any questions about either of these clubs or any of the models in the Iron World Cup, feel free to drop them in the comments below, or send me a line on Twitter or Instagram. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications too. And if you're after more golf content, head to the National Club Golfer social media channels for more.